much, Don, for being here. I am excited, super excited to be talking. Like I said, I used to do photography actually, so this is going to be fun. But you want to start by taking 30 seconds to tell us a little bit about yourself and exactly what we do.
Yeah, thanks, ST. I really am happy to be here as well. So, yeah, I am a professional photographer based in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, USA, and I do headshots, corporate and nonprofit events, and commercial photography.
Cool. What do you like better, commercial photography or headshots?
I like nature photography most of all, but it doesn't pay the bills. So, although I do teach as well, which the nature photography is helpful for. So, but
Cool.
yeah.
Okay. And at what point did you get diagnosed?
I was diagnosed only about 4 years ago, at the age of like 41. So yeah,
And what made you decide to get got diagnosed?
memes, honestly. So, us neurodivergent people clump, right? So, I was seeing a lot of memes that friends were sharing that I was like, that's me, right? So there was one in particular that was about um, if I've got something to do at 5 in the evening, I can't do anything else during the day, right? And that I was like, oh yeah, because as somebody that photographs a lot of events, I had situations where it's like, okay, I have this event at 5 or 7 in the evening, so I can't do anything else from 2 p.m. on. I just have to sit there and wait.
Wait, question. So
Yeah.
once you got diagnosed, how did it help you with this waiting?
Yeah, that's the one thing that has really been impacted because I think time management was one of my biggest problems. So um, I have gotten on medication. I'm on non-stimulant medication. So worked with my therapist and psychiatrist and just kind of realized it. Realized like, no, I can do other things. I can set alarms. I can set notifications. I can essentially train myself to fit more into my day. So
So
I'd always had this like aversion to filling my calendar, right? And I was with another photographer, and he does real estate photography, so he's photographing 8 to 12 houses a day, which is insane. But um, he showed me his calendar, and it's like there's no time from when he gets up until when he goes to bed that is not full. And I was like, oh, I couldn't do that. Now I do because I'm like, no, if I program all this stuff, including like, okay, I need this bit of time with some leeway in there for personal time, right? Then I can actually fit everything in.
yeah, what I love so much about this is how like you had that switch in your brain of like, actually it is possible for me. I just have to train myself and develop the skill.
Yeah. Yeah. There were a lot of things that helped listening to a number of podcasts, getting like the little Pomodoro cube, time cubes, and things like that. So that stuff has been really helpful.
It's awesome. And how have you seen the effects of your ADHD? Like, walk me through what it was like in your business before you've decided to start doing something about it.
Yeah. So before I knew, because as soon as I figured it out, even before I was tested and diagnosed, I started to take steps. But prior to having any sense that I had ADHD, things were really difficult. Like I would feel overwhelmed if interrupted while working on one thing, right? So, um, and the amount of work that I felt that I could accomplish was much less. So that was a huge, huge impact on my business. I've never been like a big hustle culture person. And I'm still not. Like I recognize like there has to be a good flow between, what I'm doing career wise and otherwise. Um, so yeah, so it really changed things in terms of just understanding time and how much if I compartmentalize different things, I can get things done. So yeah.
So what was there like a moment where you had that switch of like, okay, I can actually do something about this? Because you said it was even before your diagnosis, so it wasn't your diagnosis.
Yeah, I don't know that there was any particular moment. Like I've had stuff like that in the past. Like when I was in college, I worked retail. I was a assistant manager and I smoked cigarettes at the time. And I went out in the morning to open the store and there's people that gather in front of stores before you open. So you got to look busy. So I was like cleaning the windows and I had just cleaned these windows like 3 days before and they were covered in grossness because the highway was very close by. And I was like, I'm breathing that stuff in. And from there, I just quit. Right. So, um, and that was, I mean, I had smoked for a long time at that point. So, but yeah, I think in terms of the time thing, it was more of a process of like, okay, how do I do this? I tried using like Trello and I tried using all these different tools and I've fallen down and had to get back up with a lot of this stuff. But yeah, so I I don't know that I so much realized that I could do something as I thought I should do something.
Okay, that makes sense. That makes sense. It's not like it's like you technically knew that you could do something, but this was like that push that was like, okay, now it's like time to actually do something.
Yeah, I think there wasn't a lot of reflexivity or thought that went into it. A few years ago, well, I guess it's been almost a decade at this point. I was like over 300 pounds, and my doctor, I went to see a new doctor, and he was like, "You really ought to lose weight." And he was talking to me about my diet, and I said, "Well, I bake bread, I make pizza once a week, homemade pizza with homemade dough." And he was like, you need to cut 90% of the carbs. And I just took that that like offhand comment as gospel, right? I was like, okay, I'm going to do that. And I cut 90% of my carbs, which was a huge part of my diet. But like I started tracking things, I lost 100 pounds in under a year, like
Wow.
just under a year. Um, and again, it wasn't reflexive. It was just like, okay, he says I should do this, so I'm going to do this. I eventually, after like a month, I was like, I got to reevaluate what he said because I don't think he actually meant 90%. He didn't actually look at like my fitness pal and see what my diet was. He was like, no, you got to cut those carbs. So yeah.
Yeah,
So
were you always a very literal person?
um yeah, I think for the most part, yeah. So there's potentially some autism in here as well, right? That's undiagnosed. So but yeah, very, very literal thinking sometimes.
Yeah, I love that. Personally, I'm not like a massive like, oh, you have to get diagnosed or you shouldn't get diagnosed. It's like it's the awareness of like what is possible and what you could do. And so like looks like that's what you're doing. So like that's awesome. I'm
Yeah.
curious how your relationships have been affected. Like what were some challenges you've had with relationships, both personal and business, when it came like where did ADHD get in the way?
Oh, big time with personal relationships. I mean, growing up, I had teachers that were so mad because they really liked me as a person and I could answer any question and ace tests, but I didn't do any homework and didn't take any notes and everything was a mess around me. So um I have been divorced. So definitely affected my personal relationships. And in terms of business, I would say, it's really I still struggle a lot with and probably more now with sort of social anxiety related to being around a lot of like quote unquote neurotypical people. Where it's not the easiest thing to strike up a conversation always, right? Because I'm a little more self-aware now. So with that self-awareness has come a little bit more anxiety. So
How do you deal with your anxiety?
um well it's challenging. I work with my therapist and I do have like propranolol, which is like like a beta blocker or something like that. So as like sort of a rescue medicine, which even just having that without having to take it is comforting. So, but really what I try to do is I've tried to in those times when I'm feeling socially awkward, I try to shift the conversation to the person that I'm talking to, ask them more questions about themselves so that I have to talk less.
Is that less, that's less like anxious? It feels less anxious for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the awareness of it. Because like for some people that's more anxious, like, oh, I have to think of a question and I have to like listen to what they're saying, right? And it's like, oh no, for you, like talking about myself is what makes it more challenging. I'm curious what it's been like in like relationships with your business, like with your clients, um, being in time, like with them providing them what they need, things like that. How's that been going? Or what was, or maybe let's change the question slightly. What was it like before and after you've been diagnosed or have been working on your ADHD?
Yeah. I think before diagnosis, it was there were times where something might be really incredibly boring, that I had photographed an event that was super boring. And editing all of that and getting that to folks. I've always been very on top of that because I know if I let things slide, like I created this coping mechanism a long time ago of like I have to do the work as soon as possible. Because if I let it slide, it's gonna linger forever. So um but in terms of interactions, like person on person interactions, I struggled a lot with a lack of like doing contracting, right? Like not taking care of myself and not making sure that expectations were clearly stated from both people, their side and my side. So that's something, it's still a struggle a little bit. So and I think having basically insisted on a process has been super helpful. I've had to, and it's more so insisting to myself that I adhere to that process, right? Contract for everything. Because I'm mostly working with other businesses. It's rare that I do well, I mean, I do headshots but somebody's coming in to get a headshot for their business or maybe at the very least for LinkedIn. So it's more of a business relationship. Um, but yeah, so that has been something that has definitely been a struggle and definitely something that I've focused on a lot and fixing is making sure because I used to get folks that would like text me and I'd be like, yeah, sure, I can do that. But if it's on text and I've read it, forget it. I'm gonna get home and have 10 other things and I'll completely forget about that. So, I tell people, okay, email that to me.
Yes. Oh, I love that. Creating that sort of systems. So that way they're working, like things start stay organized and clear, don't, like just full off. My question to you is what's something that's still a challenge right now?
Yeah, I think well, I mean that is still a challenge again, holding myself to that. Um there are times still with like the time management stuff where I'll notice that my calendar is not full and I'm like, okay, I know I need to remember to plug in to do this, this and this so that I'm actually getting back into that flow, right? And I think yeah, just being more reflexive and more conscious of what's happening is really a challenge because I have a tendency to sort of just um, go with things, right? Like this is sort of react and let things grab my attention and handle those, right? I think that's something a lot of us struggle with. That I've had I've had a lot of problems with that. Like somebody will email me and I'm like, okay, let me take care of that, but I have other things. I've recently started to say, okay, I'm in the middle of something, like respond to an email saying, I'm in the middle of doing this. I will happily do that and give them the time when I'm going to address their their
Ooh, that
issues.
communication. Yeah.
Yeah.
Love
And then
that.
I put it into the calendar, right? Of, okay, I
Yeah.
need to get back to this person. So,
Fabulous. I love that. So you've created systems that work for you. Where can people connect with you and learn more about you?
yeah, so I am on a lot of the socials at WDO Photo, or at I think on Twitter, or not on Twitter, on TikTok, which who knows if that's still going to be a thing accessible in a couple of months. But I think there it's like pro photographer Don Orkoskey. So into my website, WDOphoto.com, is probably the best place to find me.
Fabulous. So all those links will be in the show notes. Final question.
Yeah.
What is something controversial that you believe in?
Controversial that I believe in. Oh, I can, I'm pretty far left, so there's a lot of stuff that could be considered controversial that I believe in. Um, I believe in the like the free movement of people, right? So I'm not a big fan of city states or nation states or so on and so forth. So yeah, that's probably the most controversial thing that I believe in.
I love that. Thank you so much, Don. Thank you so much for being here, for sharing your experience, for giving us hope, and for showing us what you've been able to do. I appreciate you coming here today.
Yeah, and I greatly appreciate that you're doing this. It's a great show and I love listening. So thank you so much.